like to call up our next panel. So we have Lieutenant Colonel Amanda Love, who is the Joint Program Manager for Chemical, Biological, Radiological, and Nuclear Defense. We have Luis Velazquez, the CTO with the U.S. Systems Command, and William McHenry, Mac, Senior Advisor to the Director of the Defense Innovation Unit. So thank you. Welcome. And I'm on the right slide, so I can put that away. So Luis, I kind of want to start with you because, in our prep call, you talked about sort of the different avenues for bringing solutions to the customers, and sort of maybe some may be the right one, some may be the wrong one. And so talk a little bit about that and what people should be looking for.
Yeah, so hi, so once again, I'm Luis Velazquez. I'm with Marine Corps Systems Command. So my intent here was to try and help educate the audience about there are differences, especially when you're talking experimentation, if you're talking about training, and you are working on a particular technology and you spend about half an hour talking to someone from the Marine Corps, for instance, about it, and they're not in your realm. You just lost a half hour or whole day of that business opportunity. So what I try to do with our efforts at Marine Corps Systems Command is reach out to industry and give you a voice at our forum. So every month, third Thursday of the month, we host a tech talk where you, the industry partners, are the star. It's not an industry day. It gives you the voice, gives you the platform. You get 25 minutes. And the folks that listen online are from totally across the entire spectrum. It's eclectic, right? We have industry, academia, international, coalition, foreign, everybody. And from that forum, we've had contracts get let out because people have heard technology, not from the Marine Corps, but other agencies have jumped in. We're going to this July to the UK to meet with industry partners that we met through that particular effort. So when talking to the Marine Corps in particular, there are different communities. So you want to make sure you're talking to the right one. I'm an acquisition command. That's different from an agency that does experimentation. That's Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. I know some folks here don't even know what a lab is when it comes to the Marine Corps. A lab. You guys are supposed to be lethal, destructive, cutting edge. Yes, we have a lab, does experimentation, has a lot of R&D money. And so they do that type of stuff. You may have cutting edge technology that might support them in their research, right? Their experimentation. But as we remember back in school, if you know the answer to whatever you're working on, then it's not an experiment. It's R&D. You're building toward a defined solution. If you're working the S&T realm, that'd be Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. If you're in R&D, I'm interested. So all the programs in a Naval Systems Command and all the programs in a Marine Corps Systems Command have money assigned to it to support a particular goal. And sometimes they can divest from that to support industry partner. I also manage all the small business innovative research capabilities. So small business, and you get money up front to do some research, $250,000. If it goes beyond that phase one, it goes to phase two. Now you're talking about $750,000 to do a prototype. And then hopefully you hit the holy grail, which is transition. You heard the word transition earlier. Some folks still don't know what transition means. Transition means it takes your technology and it goes into a program of record. Now it's fielded, it's sustained, and it's going to be out there for years supporting that warfighter. That's what you want if you're an industry partner sitting here. You want that, right? So I try to give you the opportunity to get into that forum. So I do the tech talks once a month, and I also hold a government-only meeting in the morning called the Innovation Modernization Working Group. And that working group is where I bring in the follow-up. So you do a tech talk, half an hour, not an industry day. Remember, it's you talking about, I got this technology. I built it in my garage. It's amazing capability. You guys don't even know about it. So you show it to us. We go, you know what? Maybe you're right. Come back. And now you talk at the Innovation Modernization Working Group. And now we're going to ask you more serious questions. And if it's from there, it leads to opportunities. So that's why I wanted to make sure you understood the difference between a Naval Syscom, a Marine Corps Syscom, a warfighting lab, a warfare center. They're all different. My office, my capability as CTO is to make sure you as the industry partner know the difference. So if I get to see your technology, I can route you in the right direction so that you can have that follow-up. Because acronym soup doesn't help you. I know that. I come up here, I can say PRC, I could say all these other acronyms, and you go, I can't even spell AI, right? Yes. I know. So there's a lot out there, but I just wanted to make sure everybody understand the opportunity to integrate and to talk to the Marine Corps. We're not aliens. We are Systems Command. We work with industry. We want to help you. We have SIBRs. We have tech talks and other opportunities for you to come over and showcase your platforms to us. All right. So I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Definitely. So, Amanda, similar question for you. Sort of talk a little bit about your organization and what your outreach, how you outreach to industry and bring in new technologies.
So not only am I chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear defense, but I'm specifically medical. My portfolio in particular is vaccine development and repurposed therapeutics. So for us, trying to find that next cutting edge thing is really the nexus of our business. I am that advanced developer, so trying to find what is going to move the needle forward. Working with DIU is finding those other industries, those other companies out there that are working on that next thing. With the chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, that's a nasty world. And we as taxpayers can't afford for me to work on one bug, one drug kind of concept. And so I'm looking at that broad spectrum, the pan-viral, pan-bacterial world. And so, a lot of that is not necessarily commercially viable in the traditional pharma community. So that's where I'm trying to bridge that gap.
So Mac, fill in the gap. Talk about, two very different missions here. How does DIU play in that area?
Yeah. So ultimately, we're a facilitating function. Is this?
Yeah.
You can hear?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Yeah. Ultimately, we try to be a facilitating function to both. There is no set DIU support, as you heard from Lewis and the different modus operandi on here. It's depends. We can come in and do some tech scouting. We can provide some information. If you have a project or a specific problem, we can come in behind that and do our full gamut. But it really depends on who we're supporting and what they need. Ultimately, and we'll tie back into those goals that Mike covered very early, as long as it fits in with those mission statements, which are incredibly broad, we're here to support what you're doing.
So I want to have you guys tell some stories. And man, we'll start with you because I know on our call you talked about, and you almost said it when you were the PAN. So Project Panacea, tell us about that and sort of what you're looking for and the lessons learned, I guess, so far.
So Project Panacea, like I mentioned, trying to get it out of that paradigm of one bug, one drug. We were looking for a pan-viral. We all lived through COVID. That is, and I'm not minimizing COVID, but that's a toe into the pool of the nastiness that's CBRN world. But it was a huge operational impact to the DOD as a whole. Just the Teddy Roosevelt was huge monetarily and personnel-wise. So using those lessons learned, I have to be ready. Preparedness, National Biodefense Strategy specifically points out to us that we have to be ready for whatever's out there. We don't know what the next threat is going to be, which is why we came to our DIU colleagues and I said, I have to find something else out there that goes across a spectrum, hits many different things. And oh, by the way, a lot of it is going to be a respiratory sort of presentation. So how do I either stop that before it infects, or how do I minimize that infection to reduce the operational impact? So we put the solicitation out for Project Panacea. I had just before that done a sort of traditional solicitation as well that took about 18 months. Project Panacea, I had 33 different people come back with presentations for us. We narrowed it down to pitch day, and then have found a couple of interest out of that hopefully in the semi-near future, FDA drug development is a little bit of a lengthy process, will provide something not only operationally impactful to the DOD, but hopefully, because of the commercialization piece of it, something for everybody.
So so you went from 33 and you're hoping to get down to just...
So I've actually let 3 contracts out of those, or 3 agreements out of those particular, solicitation.
And so that's to fund, I guess, further development, further research.
Yep.
Okay. Luis, how about you? Tell us one of your success stories that you've brought in some new technology.
Yeah, so, you got to forgive me, I like to stand up because I spent 3 years teaching at the Naval Academy, so it's always good to talk and engage with the audience. So an example of a successful opportunity was, once again, we went out and asked about wargaming, right? We are building a almost $300 million facility on Quantico that is going to be SAP, STO, fully informed. Now, some of you may not know, what is SAP? What's STO? Levels of classification. But the facility is going to be a 100,000 square foot facility. It'll be open up starting this October. And so in order to facilitate the war games that we run, these are not war games that you do out in the field where the Marine picks up a weapon, they're shooting, and they're checking and gauging their proficiency. This is a type of war game that you use to run the future concepts. Where should the Marine Corps invest 25 years from now? What kind of technology should we be pursuing? So you war game it so you can make a better informed decision in your investment policy. So the facility doesn't open until October. We still have to run war games. So I went out to industry and I said, hey, what type of war games do you have that can help us with future force design? And there was an industry partner in the UK that said, hey, we have this thing called Command PE made by Slytherin. I said, well, do you have a U.S. subsidiary? Absolutely. It had Matrix, ran the background check, found out the Air Force was using them. I called the Air Force. Air Force, do you like this stuff? Absolutely. And that led to a contract capability that we put them on task. And they are currently supporting not only Marine Corps Warfighting Lab, but they're also supporting Marine Corps University. And that means the students who are going there for higher education are leveraging those online games so they can think and they can be in the analytics. And more importantly, because it's automated, we can run those things through a learning management system and gauge where the students are through this distributed, automated war game. So it's really a phenomenal capability that we got just from discovery of one of the tech talks that I mentioned earlier. So that's a good example right there.
Yeah.
Another piece that we do, as well as agreements, I heard the word agreements, we run the cooperative research and development agreements out of Marine Corps Systems Command as well. And other agencies do well. But a CRADA, for those who are not familiar with that, means it's an agreement between the Marine Corps and your company to do mutually beneficial research and development to help come to a solution that can help the Marine Corps. And then as you develop it, it gives you opportunity to then market it to the Marine Corps or other services as well. So it gives you insight to what we're working on, to what we're looking for, and it allows you to build towards that capability and demonstrate it to the Marine Corps and to others as well. So we do agreements as well out of Marine Corps Systems Command.
All right, great.
Yeah, I just want to touch on one point. In both these examples, we're talking a strategic impact. Like you mentioned, if this is successful, it'll go back to the commercial world, and we'll have that capability spread large for the country and for our allies. On this side, we're pulling in all that data. As we're wargaming, we're building data, decision-making. All that stuff is going to be incredibly useful in the future. We can run AI algorithms against it, help our senior decision-makers make decisions with those things. So what sounds like a small effort initially, there's really strategic impacts that come in behind them.
Now, Mac, to follow up on that, so how I've got this great little idea and I'm developing, I've got some commercial customers, but you're talking about, so would your advice to me to be sort of, do I need to be thinking out 3 years or that strategic impact, or is that something that you help me discover, or?
Yeah, I think it's a little of both. Our government partners, just like our commercial partners, are incredibly smart. They see the implications of these technologies that we're dealing with all of the time, and they're also thinking iteratively. We go back to that long, drawn-out process that we discussed earlier. Mike brought up the example with the small UAS. That is not an iterative process when you're trying to do something and it takes you 10 years to get any funding behind it, right? Our commercial partners and DIU and the government writ large is now thinking, hey, we need to keep up with that iteration cycle. So I'm building something today. and maybe it's going to be successful for a year or two. And maybe this drug will work for a year or two until the viruses adapt. We need to be thinking the second and third iteration. To do that, we have to be able to move more quickly as a government. And that's why we have a DIU, frankly, is how do we stay within that iteration cycle of technology?
One thing I noticed in some earlier speakers talking about, I guess, is a lot of what you all do through OTAs. Is that sort of your preferred vehicle?
Yeah, so we only work in OTAs. We dusted off the OTAs. We came up with our current process, and we're really trying to export that process. I had a conversation with Mr. Smith, the acquisition officer at SOCOM, and he came up and said, hey, thank you for doing the CSO process. We do it now too. We want to not only give people fish, but we want to teach them to fish. If in 10 years, if everybody's utilizing these tools and utilizing them correctly, that's a big win for us.
Yeah. So, and this is for any of you all, but how do you see like the established primes, the systems integrators, where do you want them to get involved?
Yes. So key here, you talk about lead system integrators or the government integrators.
Yeah, the company.
Yeah. So companies that do the role of lead system integration, right? So we are building a capability, and there'll be numerous industry partners collaborating, sub-prime agreements, partnerships. But there's going to be one lead system integrator. And it's really important to have that good working relationship with the customer, in this case, the Marine Corps, right? So we really want a capability, and whoever is that lead system integrator has to be able to understand our language, what we're asking for, take it from the requirements documents, and work with us in a iterative process as they build towards integrating these different capabilities to get to that desired end state. I know that we communicate all the time with DIU, and there's another one called MIU to the Marine Corps side. Yes, the Marine Corps has its own innovative unit as well. So we talk to MIU, DIU, Naval Postgraduate School, United States Naval Academy, Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. We go everywhere and try and bring everybody together and say, hey, we're trying to pursue this. Who's the best lead system integrator that you've leveraged to get to this kind of desired end state? And they share it. Inside baseball, we share that information. We know, hey, if company X was great, try and get them, because they know how to talk to the different disciplines that they're bringing into their environment. If a company gets a big award, and say, for instance, it's for AI, and they have only small knowledge of AI, but they're bringing in all these other vendors that do the AI, and they don't know how to communicate with them, then there's a barrier between what I want and what they think they should build. And by the time we get to demonstration time and prototyping time, now we lost valuable time. So working with DIU, MIU, and the other folks as well, they have that inside baseball. They know who's who. And so when we come up with what are the capability gaps, what we're pursuing, what we're working on, we derive some really good guidance and direction where to go from there. So hopefully I'm not, saying, well, you're on it, but that's when we work on something, we kind of share it with you, and we hear, hey, what are you guys working on? And what vehicles are you using to help promote the information?
So are there certain, I don't know what the right word is, are there capabilities or approach that you want to see from the lead systems integrator to know, like, yeah, that's somebody you want to work with? This guy over here, not so much.
Yeah. So on the Marine Corps side, like I said, we do have what they called, every contractor knows that there's at the end of a contract, you do get kind of like a fitness report. You get from the customer, they put in in the system, how well you performed, how well you interacted, what were some of the shortfalls, and that stays in the DOD database. So that's one way of kind of surfing what's good and what's out there. But really, it's word of mouth. There's a lot of stuff that's going out there that sometimes the industry partner may have failed to address, and it just gets echoed on the DOD side. So you really want to stay, I'm sure no one here has bad intentions, but you really want to stay abreast of working with as the lead system integrator with the PM and his technical engineers. There's always going to be friction, right? There's always going to be, hey, I want this, that doesn't look right, it looks right, doesn't look right, go back and forth. But you work those things out. And the better you can do that, the more you can resolve that. And especially if you have what I call adult coping skills, don't get upset, don't throw things, don't yell, then you're going to be successful in being able to articulate, hey, here's where we're at, we're falling behind. Vendor X, found out that they had something that they couldn't deliver. Work that out. And that's key. So, yeah.
Amanda, in your world, is there like an equivalent to a systems integrator, or is that the big pharma? Talk about that relationship or how.
So no, we don't have quite that same dynamic. For us, it really stems commercialization. If they are able to sustain that product outside of what my particular need is, that's what I need to know that that company can do. And because I am such a small portion of their production at the end, unless there's something crazy going on. But it has to be adopted and they have to be sustainable because I have to be able to access this technology or this therapeutic or whatever we're working in that healthcare space several years down the line. So if they aren't commercially viable with a long-term plan, it is not necessarily a win-win on both sides. And working through DIU and in our particular project, as they mentioned earlier, that was a big piece of the decision-making of which companies we pursued, was what was their background, what did we see as their commercialization, and could they stand on their own or find other VC partners or anybody else to help really push this effort moving forward.
Yeah. But really the key, I guess we've heard this a couple of times, is that sort of the dual use that Mike talked about at the beginning.
Absolutely. Yes.
Because you want to be able to be sustained in the commercial world so it's there when you need it.
And to the points made earlier about the adversaries in the healthcare biotechnology world, they aren't even as obvious as just investing in the company, but they have been putting those students into a lot of the academic platforms and trying to work on that IP and get into those programs early on. And so again, that due diligence of really looking through these companies and the people that were behind them to ensure that we, from national security, have maintained that, the upper hand in that space.
So any questions from the audience? Or...
Yeah, before we jump into questions, just two comments. One on the systems integrators. I think Jamie touched on this, and this is important. About 10 to 15% of our contract funding goes to the system integrators. And her point, I think, is really well driven is, hey, we want our gazelles, our tech companies, to be doing what they do best. Nobody can do systems integration like the big system integrators. So that's a big point as well. The second point is there is that commercial market viability that we look at when we look at companies. If you have commercial market, your technology's already been proven to a certain extent. If Wells Fargo is using your product and has used it successfully for the last 2 years, then it'll probably work for the government with some tweaks. But it doesn't mean we don't take any risk either on a smaller company with a good idea. We just factor that risk into the overall project in the sense of, okay, we know these two technologies work because they've been proven in the commercial sector. This other technology, super interesting, but it's early stage and it hasn't been proven. Maybe 3 companies will go on contract. We're guaranteed to have a successful project, but maybe this will pan off and this will be our 100-to-1 shot.
All right. Alex, no questions. Yes, sir, right here.
With the Army, with the chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear defense, the project kind of see. So if the contracts they so of the 3 vendors that you chose and after they were vetted and you checked it out, were they only pharmaceutical or were they also other methods for using to mitigate the damage from future pathogens like viral, bacterial, fungal?
For mine, it was just therapeutic in scope. That is my portfolio. Okay. But we did get some solicitations from some other companies and technologies. And as I can pass those to my peers, I try to.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm curious, with those 33, was there any because I'm thinking about like how mature a company has to be to get involved in any of your processes. Are you looking, I guess they have to have some commercial business. But they can still be a 2-3 person company, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think we're looking across the gamut. And as we talked about, there's the risk factor. If you have the commercial market and you're already selling a product successfully, there's less risk. But let me give you an example. We did a low Earth orbit launch, our space portfolio did. We had the usual suspects come in. I think SpaceX is going to launch a rocket. Another company said, hey, we're going to hang a rocket under a 747 and shoot it up. Another company came in and said, hey, we're going to spin up the package to 17,000 miles an hour using centripetal force in a vacuum on Earth. We're going to open an aperture and shoot it up into space. Yeah. So we're all sitting around. We go to Berkeley. We talk to the physics folks there. Best we could get was 50-50. Yeah, it might work, right? But that's worth a shot, because if it does work, that changes the game. It also changes the game in multi-factor when you start looking at hypervelocity, right? So when we put the project together, we put all those companies on contract. We took that high-risk shot, and it looks like it's paying off.
So they've actually launched one like that.
They're building a full-scale model now, but the prototype model has been successful up to date.
That's amazing.
I think the company's spin launch.
So to add to that about the size of a company and getting into an opportunity to work on a contract with for instance, for the service, Small Business Innovative Research does that. So we've awarded SBIR's phase 1. The company only had one person, right? But we do ask the question, when it comes time to go further into phase 2 and prototyping, how do you envision supporting that? And then, they say, hey, if we get through the phase 1 research part and you agree, then they will bring in additional engineers and other partners to go ahead and pursue that. So the size of the company at the SBIR level at phase 1, really not as much as important as the ability for them to do the research as requested on a phase 1 SBIR. So it's kind of different from what DIU does. And as I said earlier, they don't compete with a SBIR. But at the same time, we do share information, right? So if I have a company that's pursuing a SBIR and they're doing this phase 2 and they did phase 1, but they want to go to phase 2, but they didn't do too well in the research. If they contact DIU, hey, we have a great capability, want to follow. If they ask us, we'll say, hey, this is how the phase 1 came out. We don't think it's ready to go to phase 2, and we'll share that with DIU, and then they make the informed decision if they want to pursue it via DIU opportunity to grow that company's opportunity. So they're sharing, and it doesn't really matter the size of the company coming in. It's just, can they scale?
Yeah. So does SBIR, the phase 1 and phase 2, is that create sort of like a feeder pool for DIU?
Yeah, so we see a lot of companies that have had phase 1s and phase 2s. And they come in and we'll compete for DIU contracts, and a lot of times win them. And as Mike talked very early on, before we start a project, we're bridging that valley of death. We've already laid out with a partner how we're going to transition and go to production. The SBIR phase 2 kind of gets you right to the edge of that valley, and then how do we get over, for the company, how do we get over that valley? We've got to find that government partner. We've got to do those things. When they come in and win a DIU contract, that's already been laid out. So if you successfully prototype and your technology works, that valley of death, there's already a bridge built over it. And that's why we're looking at 50% transition rate. And that's lifetime of DIU, so that number is probably today a little bit higher. And that's the real value proposition for companies, is you don't come to the edge of that valley and forced halt.
Yeah. All right. So one last call for questions. Yes, sir.
On your last remark there, do you see that transition path to DIU be more robust than a SBIR phase 3, which would allow the product sale or the next iteration that people?
So I think the difference is mainly not in the size of the production contracts and those things. It is that before we start a project at DIU, we've thought about that transition plan ahead of time. So there's no break in from, hey, 60 to 90 day goal for a prototype contract, 18 months period of performance on that prototype contract, straight into production. So that's laid out ahead of time. I think that's the biggest difference between the CSO process, which we practice at DIU, and the SBIRs, which can be, okay, got my SBIR phase 1, got my SBIR phase 2, and now what's next? And a lot of companies don't make it to that phase 3. There's not that built-in government partnership. You have to go find that partnership, which is business development, and you run into all the same problems that you do, even if you hadn't gone through the SBIRs, right?
If I could add to that as well. So SBIR's phase 1, phase 2, that's congressionally mandated dollars that go to support small business. Phase 3, there's not a single SBIR dollar that could go into a phase 3. Phase 3 has to come from program dollars, an acquisition command, a systems command. So when we talk about the transition, it's to get into a program of record, and that you have that longevity as the concept you helped formulate, the concept you helped prototype, the concept you helped build. The Marine Corps says, yep, we got it. We're putting that into our radio or into our antenna or into our vehicle, and it'll be used for the life of that vehicle, right? Mostly, because things is always innovation and you got to stay ahead of it. But that's what you want. This is phase 3, and that's coming from the program funds, at least from the SBIR side. Of course, the transition to, if industry is producing it and selling it to other industry partners, that's a success story right there. And DIU helps in that piece right there.
Yeah, I do know GSA is working on a vehicle specifically for the phase 3, so that there would be, you get that phase 2, and then you have a vehicle that you can get on to market, because there's not a mechanism for that now. So stay tuned on that. So I think with that, we're going to just wrap up. I want to thank you guys. This was great.
If I could add one more, but yet there's more, like a commercial. So I just found out that Amanda, who's active duty, she got accepted to the Eisenhower School. So what does that mean? But let me tell you why, as industry partners, why that's important, right? So I'm a retired Marine, right? So my numbers are kind of short before I retire. But Amanda has been selected for Eisenhower School, which means chances she'll go from there, could be a general someday. And all you industry partners here should be like, hey, what's your LinkedIn information? How to stay in contact? Because that's a future opportunity right there as it grows and you build your network. So anyway, I'll share my contact info for anybody that wants it, but she's the future. So congratulations, Amanda.
Hey, congratulations.